Anna, a mid-30s journalist, begins receiving strange voicemails late at night. The first one comes from an unknown number, with a man's voice gasping, "Please, help me. I'm so cold." Dismissing it as a prank, she ignores it, but over the next few nights, the messages keep coming. Each voicemail is a different voice pleading for help, a young boy whimpering, a woman sobbing, and an elderly man whispering about them watching him. The desperation in their voices haunts her, and she finally researches the numbers, only to discover that each belongs to someone who went missing under mysterious circumstances in the past few years. Driven by curiosity and an eerie feeling of dread, Anna dives deeper into the cases, connecting each caller to a disappearance. The dates align, all taking place around the same time each year, but there's no clear pattern or reason. The more she learns, the more her fear grows. One night, she gets a voicemail from a familiar voice, Mark, a former colleague who went missing a year ago. She hears his voice, breathless and terrified, pleading, "Anna, don't look in the mirrors. Don't let them see you." The warning leaves her shaken, and she tries to call back, but the number is unreachable. Odd things begin happening around her apartment. Shadows stretching strangely in the corners of her eyes, her reflection in the mirror seeming to delay by a split second. Unsettled, she starts covering her mirrors, but the feeling of being watched grows. Late one evening, her phone buzzes again, and this time her mother's voice, faint and broken with static, warns her, "Anna, it's dark here. Don't come." Her mother passed away 2 years ago, making this message both impossible and terrifying. She replays the voicemail, but it vanishes from her phone, leaving no trace. Convinced that something beyond her understanding is reaching out, Anna tracks the last known location of one of the missing callers to a condemned building on the outskirts of town. Arriving at the decrepit house late at night, she is greeted by an unsettling silence that hangs thick in the air. As she steps inside, her phone vibrates with another call. Glancing down, she sees a live video feed of herself, shot from somewhere nearby. But she's alone in the house. Realizing someone is watching her through her own phone, she whips around, finding nothing but empty darkness. An unnatural force compels her to move forward, drawn to a large mirror at the end of the hall. Her own reflection stares back, but something is terribly wrong. It's smiling. Her reflection's grin is twisted and malicious, completely out of sync with her own horrified expression. The reflection's voice mingles with all the other voices from her voicemails, overlapping as they echo. "They took us, and now they'll take you." Frozen with fear, Anna watches as her reflection presses its hands against the glass, as if trying to break through. Panic overtakes her, and she tries to turn and run, but she feels an invisible force pulling her closer to the mirror. Her phone rings again, vibrating wildly in her hand, displaying her own number as the caller. Trembling, she answers, only to hear her own voice on the other end filled with terror. "Help me. They've taken me." The lights flicker, and suddenly she feels herself being dragged toward the mirror, losing control over her own movements. Her reflection's grin widens, its hollow, dark eyes filled with a sickening glee as it watches her approach. Anna screams, but her voice echoes into nothingness as she's pulled into the mirror. Trapped behind the glass, she stares out, watching helplessly as her reflection, an entity now taking her place, walks away, leaving her imprisoned in a world of shadows. As she glances around, she sees distorted, ghostly faces staring back at her from the darkness. All the missing souls, each a prisoner in the mirror world. In the silence of her apartment, her phone lies abandoned on the floor. The screen lights up one last time, her own number calling itself. Her final voicemail echoes into the empty room. "If anyone hears this, please help me." But there's no one left to listen, and her call goes unanswered as the screen fades to black. Anna, a mid-30s journalist, is no stranger to late-night work, but lately her phone keeps buzzing with strange, unsettling voicemails from unknown numbers. The first one she listens to has a man's voice, gasping, "Please, help me. I don't know where I am. I'm so cold." Although it sounds disturbingly real, she dismisses it as a prank and goes back to work. But that night, another voicemail arrives, this time a young girl's voice, barely a whisper. They're here, in the shadows, watching. Despite the eerie nature of the messages, she shrugs them off, but the calls don't stop, and soon they come every night. Each voicemail is different, but shares a common theme. desperate voices pleading for help. Her curiosity piqued. Anna researches the numbers and discovers each belongs to someone who disappeared mysteriously over the past several years. Driven by a mixture of dread and journalist's curiosity, she investigates further, finding that these disappearances took place on the same date each year with no logical explanation. The haunting voicemails continue, each one more terrifying than the last. One night, she receives a message from a familiar voice. Mark, a former colleague who vanished a year ago. His voice is frantic, stuttering in fear. Anna, don't look in the mirrors. Don't let them see you. She freezes, realizing the voice is unmistakably his. Yet she knows he was declared missing, possibly dead. As she attempts to call back, her phone goes dead, and the voicemail disappears as if it was never there. That night, she notices strange things around her apartment. Shadows seem to stretch and flicker in the corner of her eye, as if something or someone is watching her. Every time she passes a mirror, her reflection feels wrong. Its eyes linger on her longer than they should, and at times she thinks she sees a faint smile, even though she isn't smiling herself. Terrified, she begins covering her mirrors, but the dread only intensifies, and she's haunted by a sensation of being watched from all angles. The next evening, she gets another call, this time from her mother's voice. Her mother passed away 2 years ago, making the message impossible, but she hears the fear in her mother's voice. Anna, don't come here. It's too dark, so dark. She tries to replay the voicemail, but like before, it vanishes without a trace. Fear grips her, yet she's compelled to dig deeper. She traces the last known location of one of the missing callers to a condemned house on the outskirts of town, a place known for its unsettling reputation. Horror Scene 1, The Haunted Drive. As Anna drives to the abandoned house, her phone buzzes with notifications. It's another voicemail, but this one comes from her own number. She hesitantly plays it, hearing her own voice distorted and pleading, "Turn around. Don't come here." Chilled to the bone, she nearly turns back, but her curiosity is too strong and she continues forward, clutching the wheel with white-knuckled hands. Every now and then she glances in the rearview mirror, feeling as if something is lurking just behind her car, but nothing appears, until a split-second flash where she sees a shadowy figure in the back seat, its hands stretching toward her. She swerves, heart pounding, and when she looks again, the figure is gone. Horror Scene 2. The echoing whispers in the house. Arriving at the condemned house, Anna steps inside, finding the air thick and suffocatingly still. As she moves through the dark, creaking hallway, faint whispers begin to echo around her. She can't make out the words, but it sounds like dozens of voices murmuring at once, overlapping in desperation. When she shines her flashlight on the walls, she realizes the whispers aren't random. They're repeating phrases from her voicemails. "Help me. They're watching. Don't look." It's as if the very walls are alive, absorbing the terror of each missing person. Horror Scene 3. The Portraits of the Missing. In one of the rooms, Anna finds old photographs covering the walls. Each one is of a person staring directly into the camera, their faces tense with fear. She studies each face, horrified to realize they match the photos of the missing people she'd researched. In the dim light, the eyes of the portraits seem to follow her. As she steps closer, she notices something even more disturbing. Their eyes are moving, slowly tracking her every movement. The longer she stares, the more she hears their voices in her mind, screaming for help, their voices rising in a panicked chorus that grows louder until she has to cover her ears. Horror Scene 4. The Mirror Room. At the end of a dark corridor, Anna finds herself drawn to a room filled with wall-to-wall mirrors. The air feels heavy, and as she steps inside, her phone buzzes again with an incoming call from her own number. She doesn't answer, but glances at her reflection. Her face stares back, but something's wrong. Her reflection is grinning, its mouth stretched unnaturally wide, eyes dark and hollow. She watches, paralyzed, as her reflection begins to whisper, "They took us, and now we'll take you." Its hand presses against the glass, and Anna feels an icy coldness spreading through her, as if her own reflection is draining her energy, preparing to pull her into the mirror world. Horror Scene 5. Trapped in the reflection. In her last, desperate moments, Anna tries to run, but she feels a force pulling her backward. Her own reflection seems to take control, grinning wider as it watches her struggle. As she stumbles, her phone rings again, showing her own number on the screen. And when she picks it up, she hears herself on the other end, screaming, "Help me, please help." The reflection grabs her, yanking her into the mirror. She finds herself trapped in a dark, cold space, surrounded by the ghostly faces of all the missing people, each one a hollow-eyed prisoner of the mirrors. Through the glass, she sees her reflection walk away, leaving her alone in the darkness. In her empty apartment, Anna's phone lies abandoned on the floor. The screen lights up one last time, her number calling itself. Her final voicemail echoes into the silence. "If anyone hears this, please help me." But no one is there to listen, and her desperate plea fades as the screen fades to black.